Hakeem Jeffries underestimated America's sheriff.
What people want in inner city communities like those I represent, or as Sheriff Clarke would refer to it as the ghetto.
And he spent most of his time trying to trap Clarke with one gotcha after another, until the sheriff had had enough, and he shut the whole thing down with a single sentence.
We don't have the rule of law when it's merely a suggestion for them that they're going to jail or to put their hands behind their back.
That's why today's video is not to be missed. So here we go.
I think most would agree that in a democracy, we just need a balance between effective law enforcement on the one hand and a healthy respect for the Constitution, for civil rights and civil liberties on the other. And what people want in inner city communities like those I represent, or as Sheriff Clarke would refer to it as the ghetto, what people want is to make sure that the constitutional principle of equal protection under the law applies to everyone. And there's concern that in certain instances that's not the case. And that creates consequences in terms of a distrust in many communities, perhaps leading to the absence of cooperation. And let me just start with Sheriff Clarke. You mentioned in your testimony that black-on-black crime is the elephant in the room that few want to talk about. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
We've had a very robust discussion about it today. Have you been satisfied? It's come up several times.
Not at all.
Okay, you're not satisfied.
This hearing happened years before Democrats turned defund the police into a mainstream talking point. But you can already see where things were heading. The BLM movement was picking up steam nationwide, and Mr. Jeffries was repeating many of the same arguments that would later become standard within the party. Sheriff Clarke, on the other hand, was warning about the consequences long before most people were paying attention. His argument was pretty straightforward. The people who suffer the most when crime gets out of control are law-abiding black families living in those neighborhoods, because gangs are a much bigger threat to their daily lives than the police. But Hakeem didn't like that point, and he tried to twist the discussion into a false equivalence.
It's a problem. 80% of whites kill whites, correct?
I won't dispute that figure.
Okay, actually, it's 83%. Now, is white-on-white violence a problem in America that we should also have a robust discussion about?
Violence in America, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, Congressman, violence in America in general is problematic. But if you look at the rates, that's where it starts coming a little more into balance in terms of in the data I've seen, and I've looked at a lot of it, the white-on-white crime does happen, 80% figure you put out there, but when you look at the rates of it, these two are not even close.
Right, the rates are roughly equivalent in terms of the context of people who live next to each other, and because of housing segregation patterns, or just where people tend to live in America, ethnic violence tends to occur, racial violence within the same group. And so elevating it beyond that fact, I think, is irresponsible. We all want to deal with the black-on-black violence problem.
Hakeem is basically trying to gaslight people into thinking that talking about gang violence is somehow irresponsible, and he even threw out statistics in an attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere. But here's what the data actually shows. According to the FBI's gang activity data, between 2021 and 2024, Black Americans accounted for about 41% of reported gang-related cases, despite making up roughly 13.5% of the US population. But what makes this even more worrying is how young many of those involved actually were. More than 25% of the victims were under 18, while 34% of these offenders were juveniles. And to be clear, this isn't an indictment of an entire race. A Johns Hopkins study found that just 2% of black male teens and young adults were responsible for 36% of all gun homicide fatalities in 2021, showing that violence is heavily concentrated among a very small group. Instead of addressing reality, though, Hakeem kept trying to distort the hearing. And that's when Sheriff Clarke started dismantling this narrative.
Sheriff Clarke, you also mentioned that, the use of force should be examined in terms of factual data and not an emotional foundation of false narratives. Is that correct? Did I get your testimony correct in that regard?
Mr. Chair and Congressman, yes.
Okay. Now, was the reaction to the Eric Garner case, who was choked to death using a procedure that had been banned by the NYPD for more than 20 years, wasn't resisting arrest, said, "I can't breathe" 11 times on 11 different occasions. There was no response by all of the police officers who were there. Was that a false narrative that people in the city of New York and the country are reacting to, sir?
He wasn't choked to death, not from the report that I had seen out of the grand jury testimony, and even from the medical examiner's report. He wasn't choked to death.
The medical examiner ruled the death a homicide by asphyxiation. In the ghetto, that's called being choked to death, sir.
Well, we could have this discussion later on then about the facts, because we could be here for a while. My understanding is he died of a heart attack.
Just like the George Floyd case, the cause behind Eric Garner's death depends on who you're asking or where they get their information from. Officially, both deaths were ruled as homicides tied to police restraint, and health issues were also listed as contributing factors. The medical examiner testified to those effects. On top of that, the police officer in Garner's case was never indicted at the state level. The DOJ declined to bring federal civil rights charges, yet the NYPD still disciplined him internally, and ultimately, he was fired. So it's no surprise so many people are confused by all of this, and Sheriff Clarke used the moment to clear a few things up for the committee.
But anyway, you said that he wasn't resisting arrest. He was resisting arrest. He was told that he was under arrest and put his hands behind his back, and he wouldn't do so. And that's why I put in my remarks here the reference from Thomas Sowell about when law enforcement officers tell someone they're under arrest and they can't use force to execute that arrest. We don't have the rule of law when it's merely a suggestion for them that they're going to jail or to put their hands behind their back. Those are behaviors, like in the instance of Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, where some different choices by the individual could have helped the situation. In other words, Mike Brown was just simply told to get out of the street.
Sir, my time has expired, but for you to come here and testify essentially that Eric Garner is responsible for his own death when he was targeted by police officers for allegedly selling loose cigarettes. If we are going to have a responsible conversation, we've got to be able to at least agree on a common set of reasonable facts that all Americans can interpret, particularly in this instance, because they caught the whole thing on videotape.
It's ironic hearing Jefferson lecture everyone about the facts after spending most of the hearing relying on half-truths. But here's one fact that rarely gets mentioned. Eric Garner had previously been arrested 30 times, with prior charges including assault and resisting arrest. Now, that doesn't justify what happened, but it is part of the full picture, and leaving it out only fuels more division. So it's beyond me why Democrats chose this case as one of their defining examples. And props to Sheriff Clarke for bringing some much-needed clarity to this hearing and recognizing where Democrats were trying to steer the conversation in the broader BLM narrative long before most people did. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the story. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, you heard it here at the Dais.